Hello.
How are you?
Okay, it's spring break for me.
It is, yes.
Spring
Happy
break,
spring
spring break,
break.
spring break, spring
Well-deserved break,
break.
for sure.
Yeah.
You've been doing so much.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's
there's nothing
little
to say.
humble bub. Yeah.
There's nothing to say there.
How is it going so far? Beautiful day today. My goodness.
Yeah, I got the hammock. Winnie is confused by what he's supposed to do in the hammock.
Yeah.
He also still hates the pool.
I was in
case
the
anyone was
hammock.
wondering, Winston hates the water.
Yeah. Well, yeah. He's very curious about it. So if he goes out on his own through our doggy door, if you look out there, like he's either lying in the dirt or grass or he's sniffing at the pool. He just I don't know if it smells interesting to him.
He
but
sniffs at the pool every time, but right before he pees.
Before and after, yeah. He'll
needs to
pee
smell
and
it.
he runs up to the pool and yeah, I don't know what it is, but it somehow has become part of his habit. It's pretty hilarious. But I was also this was our first day with the hammock up, and it was just a beautiful choice. It was really, really nice. Although I will say I got a little luckier going out a bit earlier because the way we had it set up, my head was in the shade, which was nice and made it much more palatable for me. You were in the full sun. Maybe that works for you, but I felt pretty hot when I was sitting next to you.
No, it was very hot.
Yeah. What else is going on? Got some Wizard Unite stuff going on. Big storyline stuff. Pretty exciting.
Well, they shifted the calendar because they were working on the update. So everything is compact and yeah, it's basically April. So that means another whole month of things, which is also my 1-year anniversary from getting affiliate on Twitch.
I know. Wow, what a year.
So I've been streaming for a year.
Because you told me something about it'll be a year since the year marker in Wizard Unite, meaning it'll be the 2-year marker, and I was like, you have got to be kidding me that was a year ago.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Granted, it's June, so it's still a couple months away.
Right.
Yeah, otherwise, I've been playing we played a cool game together, which we're gonna pick up on stream sometime this week. Yeah, well, of course, yes, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, it's called It Takes Two.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a cute little narrative where we're gonna get copy striked.
No, it was bad.
Where it's this husband and wife. Okay, the storyline is it's a husband and wife. They're planning on getting divorced, and they have a kid, and she has these little dolls, and she basically cries on them, and they come to life, and you play as those characters who are the husband and wife, and it's a really cool co-op type I guess mechanic where you're working together, even though you don't have the same abilities. I was watching the VOD this morning, and I realized that it's actually really the game is more helpful than what we were leading on, because it'll tell you when there's a point of interest to interact with. It'll have the color, and that color corresponds with your character. So you kept trying to jump on the little nail, but it was blue, and that's my character. So I was the only one that could do that. But yeah, it's a bunch of household things. So we were a hammer and nail combo. We fought a demon toolbox. I don't know.
And a vacuum cleaner. Yeah, it's super fun. It's really well put together.
Yeah.
And you have your term that you like now that you've come across.
Ludonarrative.
Yeah.
Where that means that the narrative and the game mechanics are consistent
in sync,
and integrated. Yeah. So it makes sense that
we're band.
Doing these things.
In sync.
Yeah. In sync coined the term ludonarrative.
Yes, of course they did.
Just kidding.
I believe Justin wrote about it.
Oh, man.
Yeah, in digital get done. All right, we're off the deep end. It's a good way to start.
We rewrote history of
It's spring break for you, we got a certain energy. And it's clearly spring. It's light out right now, and it's almost, 7 p.m.
Yep.
Do you want to get into it, though?
Yeah, let's go.
All right. One's ready. Turn to page 314.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Pi. Professor Trelawney's prediction. Today's lesson is called Interpretation.
Mm-hmm.
A synopsis. The chapter begins with the students buckling down for finals, and our trio concerned about the news that the executioner would be attending Buckbeak's appeal, an ominous sign that the decision had already been made. Hermione's schedule appears to have errors, but she won't elaborate. The beak.
Anyway,
Bucky.
sorry. I
No, no problem. Harry proceeds through his finals with mixed success, including an out-of-control cheering charm that causes Ron to laugh hysterically for an hour. His last final is Divination, a one-on-one final involving crystal gazing. In it, he sees Buckbeak flying freely. Afterward, Trelawney appears to enter a trance state and recites out a prophecy about the Dark Lord and his servant, and then proceeds not to recall her prophesizing. Harry wants to tell Ron and Hermione, but is interrupted by an urgent note that Buckbeak has lost the appeal and is set to be executed. Hermione goes to retrieve Harry's abandoned cloak, and the trio go visit with Hagrid to comfort him. While they're in the cabin, they surprisingly find a frightened Scabbers before hiding while Buckbeak is apparently executed.
Mm-hmm.
What a chapter. I mean, this is we have this, I feel, probably in all good stories we're this is the approach to the climax of the story, right? Like we have had all these threads being pulled throughout the story, and now they're all coming together. It's like Scabbers and Hermione's schedule and Buckbeak and
Yeah, I wrote a lot of things down about or related to the final exams, so I'm glad you had that in your synopsis. So the first one, like, I mean, they have an intense final exam schedule, which I guess is like they have this every year, but for whatever reason, because it was outlined, I was like, okay, we have Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So Monday starts with the Transfiguration teapot to tortoise. Did you know that tortoises are turtles, but not all turtles are tortoises? Because I did not.
I think I did know that.
That's what I learned.
Yes, I think I did.
So Hermione's like all stressed because she can't make the tortoise. And she's like, I have a turtle. It looks more like a turtle. Tortoises have more rounded and domed shells, where turtles have thinner, more water dynamic shells. A difference is that tortoises spend most of their time on land, and turtles are adapted for life spent in water. Tortoises also have club-like forelegs and elephantine, which is a word. I did not know that was a word, but elephantine hind legs. Because tortoises are often larger and heavier, their hind legs help them move around and carry extra weight. And turtles will have more flipper-like legs or webbed feet. So I just learned
they swim a lot.
A couple of things about turtles and tortoises.
Very cool, yeah.
Also, the comment about the willow shell. There was a comment in there about the willow shell. That I looked up is actually a classic design that happens on teapots. It's often depicted as it's a white with the blue is the decor, and it's supposed to represent this Chinese setting, and there's a whole lore related to a willow tree that's part of it. So
very interesting.
Yeah, I was like, oh, okay, all of that packed into this very little minor turtle tortoise exchange.
You bought me a teacup.
Yep.
That has somewhat a similar
in there
color scheme.
Yeah.
It's like blue and ceramic. Yeah.
Yeah, I got that when
Beautiful.
I went
to
China.
Yes, indeed.
Monday also the cheering charm. So yeah, the cheering charm. I did because I said in that chapter, Hermione's all stressed about it, and it actually comes up in the OWLs later in their later years, but. Now we have it here. The lesson that she slept
Let's pause
through
on the cheering charm, because this was what I kind of looked at, because I was just so tickled by the idea that Ron laughs for a full hour hysterically, except for that it's actually quite dark, right? In the sense that what I looked up was when magic goes wrong. What's happening, right?
Well,
so it's spells that break, right? But it's not just kids. It actually gets dark fast. I'll just mention some things that are going to happen in the future that are relevant. So the cheering charm was good. Splinching is a thing.
Yes.
When you try to apparate and you're not particularly practiced at it, or you're in dire circumstances, you can actually leave a piece of yourself behind. So we'll see Ron deal with that. Neville makes a lot.
That it gets stretched?
I don't think so. I think it rips off.
Oh.
Because you're displacing yourself. You're in one spot, then you're in another spot. The whole of yourself doesn't move. Some of it gets left behind it. Yeah. Very, very scary. In the seventh one, right? Ron destroys his arm.
Seem He wasn't bloody.
No, yes, he was.
Oh,
yes,
he
he
was?
is. Yeah. Yeah, he is. He is.
I'm gonna have to rewatch that.
Yeah. Well, maybe not in the movie, but
Well, yeah, I
he
guess that would
gets
make sense.
wrecked pretty hard because Hermione's fumbling and it's all bloody and there's the potions
Mm.
and stuff. Neville makes a lot of mistakes. Like in the book, he makes a lot more mistakes than I think in the movie. In the movie, often Seamus is the one who's like portrayed as making a ton of mistakes. But those are kind of interesting, and it is related to like learning, right? But then also you have in the second book Harry with the flu powder and mispronunciation and winding up in a different place, which was interesting. In the seventh book, oh, of course, also in the previous book, we had Ron's broken wand, which was an interesting relationship, and Lockhart, like, and how badly that actually goes when something misfires or backfires in that case. We'll hear about Luna Lovegood, and her mother has a very severe accident with magic. So like magical accidents are kind of interesting. And then Ariana Dumbledore will also be a relevant kind of person when it comes to what uncontrolled or accidents look like with magic. It was just really interesting, and I was glad that it went that direction because when I started, I was like, oh, it'll kind of like, it's kind of funny. It like made me laugh that Ron had to laugh hysterically for an hour, or like the vomiting of the slugs. Like it's used sometimes as this, funny moment, but really like there's a darkness to it. That's all.
Yeah.
That's all I got.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, magic is pretty dangerous, which I guess like from a future perspective, when we encounter Dolores Umbridge of the sort of like, oh, well, you can't handle this. Like you're going to just learn about it. You're not going to actually do it, is often something that we also see in schools of not letting students do the thing, but just think about the thing or talk about the thing,
right?
But not make anything with the thing.
There's a certain perspective, and I think that's where I was hoping to go with the title of like interpretation, is that we have some experience with that as like a framework to understand even knowing and whatnot from our training. And I think like this is related with Umbridge, is that you can talk about the application of knowledge in bad ways, right? Of like the same type of knowledge can be applied to bad ends or good ends, and in between, of course. And so like you can always use the fact that something could be good or bad to justify its inclusion or exclusion from a curriculum. It's very difficult to navigate this. And it's interesting, I think, for math, not to go too far off the path, but like there's some educational justification for math. A group of people large in number say like, well, math is fairly neutral, and that's actually a virtue for learning it, that like it is sort of abstracted, and therefore like it is up to the user kind of to what ends it's put. Kind of interesting. You could argue that for science.
We talked about this in like our first season about like they don't even talk about ethics in this school or in our school. So like I mean, at the end of the day, if you're not going to center those conversations, then you've already given up any sort of like resemblance of control of the content that you try to engage with in a schooling setting. So I understand like people being afraid of like, oh, what are people going to do with this knowledge or whatever, or even thinking about the dark arts, like studying that. I mean, I know it's defense against the dark arts, but they have this whole restricted section in their school library. And so there are things that are marked as dangerous, or things that maybe shouldn't be known on a larger scale, but you still have access to it. And so until you like really practice, or I don't, practice is not the right word, but like engage in conversations about what it means to be what you do with knowledge, then I don't know, like you can't pretend like, oh, well, this is fine, because you're actually making it worse because you're not talking about it.
Yep. Well, yes, I agree completely, and I'm glad you tied that back in with like restricted sections, and what we'll learn about Horcruxes I think is a good example of this. And we literally face this in education a lot, of sort of like, do you teach these sort of tragedies or bad things that have happened, say in history or science or even mathematics, like being applied to evil ends, and I think you get these weird arguments that we probably talked about in previous episodes of like, well, you shouldn't expose people to this versus you need to expose people to this. That would be where I land generally, because otherwise they're going to stumble across it likely in an unsupervised manner, which, brings up all sorts of different problems. So
yeah, it's interesting because a lot of times the arguments are like fear of indoctrination, which I know we have talked about before, but wouldn't you rather that be in a setting within a community where people are at least have a relationship with each other to be able to have difficult conversations or work through things that are messy or complicated, rather than like, oh, we'll pretend like it doesn't exist, censor everything, and then those things are going to be seen anyway, and you don't have a structure or a space that is with like a loving consideration because you care about the people involved. It's just sort of, I don't know, it could be propaganda, it could be like all of that other stuff that people are afraid of, but I don't know. I'm kind of in this like mindset of you relinquished the right to like complain about it because you were like, oh, I'm not going to even touch this because that'll be the solution.
It's a real puzzle. And I think the problem that I have the most with like, okay, the negative word definitely would be you censor something so you don't bring it in or you don't expose somebody, might be the positive way to think about it, is like to ideas that really don't deserve airtime, right? But the problem, of course, especially in this day and age, is that doesn't mean those ideas aren't getting airtime, and like it might be better if people were better equipped to deal with them.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this with Chamber of Secrets and like just the whole like they uncovered this like basilisk thing, the Chamber of Secrets, which is connected and deeply rooted in a pureblood ideology. And we mentioned in like a previous episode, like I guarantee you those teachers at Hogwarts weren't like, oh, let's have a serious discussion about what this is. Like it's like, oh, let's ignore it because like we know this is wrong and whatever. But that does, obviously we still see instances of that ideology being enacted in different ways present day with the students. And
And now I'm thinking about like, we talked about the null curriculum before, but I'm thinking, because we talked Horcruxes, but I can't remember if there's any educational space for memory modification. And then I also think there's not any educational space for legilimens and occlumency, which we'll see Harry go through in like a private tutoring way in the 5th book.
Yeah.
Which are also interesting because like you could argue that the whole argument in the 5th book will boil down to whether Harry should know about what Voldemort is trying to do or not. Will it make him weaker? Will it make him stronger? Kind of interesting.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, when I was looking at the final exam stuff, I was thinking a lot about just this concept of like what students need to know or like what they should be learning, that sort of thing. And like, because ultimately what this whole week of final exams for these students is like, oh, well, you care about a particular thing for students to be able to do or know or whatever it is.
You could definitely argue, and we hear this a lot, about the uselessness of what is being taught. Like the cheering charm is, I can't imagine a proper use of it that isn't somehow evil, actually. Certainly like divination and the crystal gazing, like the fact that you have to have a gift to be able to even do it, like it's a very puzzling, it's very real, the educational conundrums.
So on Tuesday, Hagrid in Care of Magical Creatures is he's done. He doesn't care. That's I read that section and I was like, I know what that feels like, Hagrid. I understand what you're going through, but you still have to keep going. In the sense of like, why are you doing this exam? You don't even want to be here. Let's all go home. So keep the flopper worm alive for an hour.
And they best just leave him alone.
Yeah.
I wonder if anyone failed.
Maybe Malfoy.
Yeah,
wanting to torture it. Malfoy would not fail. Lucius would be all up in there. The confusing concoction in potions, which Harry believes that Snape gave him a 0, which I found also comical because I can't even imagine giving a student a 0 on an assessment unless they didn't do it,
Right.
in which case it would be an incomplete,
That's
but
right.
whatever. So I looked a little bit at the confusing draft, and it's related to something called the befuddlement draft, where, so confusing is to confuse the person. Befuddlement is to cause the person to desire producing reckless behavior. And in both potions, what I found from the wiki is that the ingredients are scurvy grass, lovage, and sneezewort. And I was like, oh, interesting. Interesting. I wonder if Gareth Greengrass used this on Grimfall. No. So
Yeah.
I had like all sorts of stuff. Defense Against the Dark Arts is this giant obstacle course, which I'm sitting here being like, okay, like, of all the teachers, I could see Lupin having the most practical, like in the sense of like you have to perform something in a context or situation out of all of these subjects. But I'm also kind of like, I don't know about that one. I'm not sure. And then poor Hermione at the end, they have to encounter a boggart. So she's just like,
she failed.
She sees Hermione. She sees herself. No, she sees McGonagall just being like, "You failed everything," which to a certain extent made me pause because I was like, she was hysterical about it. So then I'm like, wait, should they be looking at boggarts? That even if they, especially because they reveal your worst fear, like, or like, at what point does it become torture? Like, you're just torturing students. And then divination. So this is like the bigger one with the orb. So, yeah, Harry said, so it seemed to me that Harry was making stuff up, right? Yeah. And of course, Trelawney's like, no, this is like whatever.
I love that she's excited when he first brings up the hippogriff, and she's like, oh,
yeah. Well, because she's like, oh, maybe he does.
It dead?
Yeah, that's
and because she knows about the execution.
Everyone does. I did have a question though. So like, Parvati is she comes down because they're doing this individually, and she's like, oh, Trelawney says I have the true markings or whatever, makings of a seer. So does that mean that she is good at lying, or like what is the implication there, or can be a fraud? Like
this is entirely up to the interpretation of Trelawney. So if she likes you, and you're committed to her fraud, then she will give you an A.
You're like, oh, you could be the next seer. So I went down this like slight rabbit hole with seers because apparently there is an ancient wizarding practice of consulting a naming seer. So this is when couples go to like, they're trying to figure out what to name their baby. So some families have a tradition of names. So the Black family like to name their offspring after stars and constellations. And which this is from the Wizarding World. There's like a post on there. It says, which many would say suits their lofty ambition and pride. And then other wizarding families like the Potters and the Weasleys just pick their favorite names. And then they just pick a name. So,
Bilious.
Bilious. Well, that's his grandpa, right?
Yeah, or uncle.
Or whoever it is, a family member. So apparently a naming seer will, for a hefty payment of gold, predict the child's future and suggest an appropriate name that fits that. The blog post says this practice is becoming increasingly rare. Many parents prefer to let them find their own way and dislike receiving premature hints of aptitude, limitations, or at worst, catastrophe. Mothers and fathers have often fretted themselves silly.
I'm going to name him Grim Folly.
Yeah, right. On the way home from the naming seer, wishing they had not heard the seer's prediction about their child's personality or future. That makes me laugh, though, because I'm like, okay, you went and paid money to a person who's going to be like, oh, this will happen. You're not going to like this,
but you should name the child Voldemort. After Thomas.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So I thought that was funny because I was like, oh, Sears, naming Sears specifically because I don't know, people, well, names are important, I guess, but it's also kind of weird because it's like, why do you care so much? But I guess you could say that to a lot of what they do or what people do. And then after Trelawney becomes possessed, like, which in the movie is like kind of scary when she's just like, the Dark Lord, blah, 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 blah. And the way it's written, we'll find out later, is very interesting. But after Harry tells her, the quote I wrote down for this chapter is she says, I would certainly not presume to predict anything quite as far-fetched as that. And I'm like, lady, I'm about to punch you in the face.
Yeah.
Like, come on, Trelawney.
Yeah. I saw that one too, and I've had the same reaction.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just like, this woman.
Well, it's also like they do this all the time. All the adults, they like look away when it's actually anything serious or meaningful. And then when it's something that's just so insignificant, they care about these little things or want to make a big spectacle, which I don't know, I guess keep avoiding the danger that is clearly ahead. And then the last thing that I saw, which is when so Hermione like is being, I don't know how to describe Hermione in this book, but this is definitely part of her like character arc. And so she is becoming more brave in the sense of, or demonstrating her bravery of just being like, when Ron says is like she walks out on Trelawney, she punches Malfoy, and then she storms off to go find the invisibility cloak on her own. She goes and gets it. They go to see Hagrid. And, okay, first of all, Scabbers is in a milk jug. Like, what? Which we'll find out in I imagine the next chapter, or I guess the next
soon,
two.
I think.
Yeah,
I think the next chapter is Dog, Cat, and Rat.
Oh, so okay.
I think
so. We've been waiting on this whole Scabbers situation for a while.
Yeah, we have.
But this is the moment where they come up, and Walden McNair is with them, which is the name of the Ministry Executioner who shows up. I wasn't sure if I should spoiler alert this, but he
friends with Lucius.
I was gonna say, he will be revealed to be a Death Eater.
Yes, he will be.
And what I found on his wiki page is that his Boggart is Voldemort, which I thought was interesting because that I think represents this idea of people following him because they're terrified of him, or like how that dynamic comes into play for why do people follow this person to begin with.
Not all of them are true believers.
But yeah, he participated in the first Wizarding War, and like a bunch of the other Death Eaters, said that they were being controlled or under control.
Yeah, you'd really think that like developing some way of verifying whether they were under control or not would be like a top priority. Doesn't seem like anyone's trying to do that.
Or at least, I mean, you're tracking all of your under 17-year-olds. Why don't you just track these people? But I don't know. Maybe that's too much surveillance. That might be too much in the other direction.
Yeah, negligent homicide. You're still going to jail.
And that's all that I have.
Yeah, it's a good chapter. It's definitely, you can, for me, like it feels like a big turning point. Like, and having it be finals just helps. Like putting Buckbeak's execution on the day of the last final is just such a fascinating choice, and like to make it all fit together like that. Yeah, and I appreciate the consistency in the characters. Like they have true arcs and they have true consistencies. It's not like somebody just like night and days us. Is that like Hermione reaching this point of being like, just tell me the password, I'll go get it. Like it's been building.
Yeah.
Why she would be like, I don't care anymore. Like I'm gonna break some rules.
Well, she also knows that this is not okay. This whole situation is not okay. I loved how Ron was like, I did so much research and they're gonna just disregard it. And I was just like, oh, ouch. Yeah. Yeah. It's like from their different positions, like how this is very frustrating for them of like, from the perspective of like, this is not like, this is unjust. Yeah. Unjust. And Malfoy, oh man, there was that one line in there. Malfoy was basically bragging that Buckbeak was going to be sentenced to death. And I'm like, oh man. Bro, wow, that's bad.
You got to work on yourself.
Yeah, you do. Like, man.
A lot of apologists for Draco out there and Snape.
I know, I'm one of them, but it's hard to be in these like really, really awful moments. Like I know when adversaries came out, people were like, "Oh, Draco's not an adversary," but it's like you look at his record, like he does some really, really bad things. But yeah.
That was good, though. That was fun.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Until next time, then.
One's ready.